fentanyl.
There's been a seismic shift in the drug landscape in America.
The tiniest dose can kill.
Drugs have always been around. That's nothing new. What's different today is how lethal they are.
Tens of thousands of victims every year, many young and unaware.
I think these kids don't realize that it can happen to anyone.
Alarm bells are ringing.
You cannot trust a random pill. This is life or death.
But is anyone hearing them?
It's a deception. What we need in this country is a grassroots movement.
Now, a national conversation.
Without this medication, that person is going to die.
I'm just a barista, but I'm really glad I had the Narcan and knew how to use it.
Parents, educators, the front lines.
And I keep thinking that I should have known because I'm a police officer.
We are first responders, that's what we're called. We should be making sure we save people's lives.
An urgent wake-up call.
If my story can save one person, then it's worth sharing.
To save a life. A national fentanyl alarm.
Hello and welcome. I'm John Donvan.
And I'm Caren Zucker. Welcome to a national conversation about how to save lives, especially young lives.
And how to prevent deaths that actually are preventable. And the key word is fentanyl, a word that we're guessing most of us have at least heard by now. But we've put this program together because are we really hearing it? Is the danger that fentanyl presents across our country, in our schools, in our workplaces, in our homes, is that danger truly recognized and understood?
Unfortunately, the answer appears to be no. And that's the reason for this program, because so many people are dying. Let's look at the numbers.
Every week in America, about 22 teenagers die from drugs. 75% of those deaths are linked to fentanyl.
Fentanyl is 50 times more potent than heroin, and it kills an estimated 150 people a day.
The numbers of teen overdose deaths from fentanyl tripled over a recent 2-year period.
The fact is, fentanyl is involved in the deaths of more Americans 55 and under than any other cause.
And something else that's important, many of the people dying from fentanyl did not even know they were taking fentanyl. Basically, in those instances, they were being poisoned.
So what's the human impact? We've asked some brave people to share their stories.
So let's listen, starting with Nico Peterson. Nico?
Thank you, John. Some evenings, I drive near my home in Durango, Colorado, where I can see the sunset, and I greet my friend Gavin in that sunset, because I know he's there, a part of it. Gavin and I were really close. We were born one day apart and planned on doing our 16th birthdays together. The night he died, he told me he was going to try Percocet for the first time, that he got from a friend. I said, be safe, and went to bed. I learned about his overdose the next morning. 4 friends came by to break the news. One of them held me by the shoulders to brace me. About 20 friends and family gathered at Gavin's girlfriend's house to cry. The Percocet was fake. It was fentanyl. He didn't know that. The thing about Gavin, he was just so accepting, so well-liked by everyone. All I've wanted to do since that happened is to educate people about the dangers of fentanyl.
My name is April Martin. I am a career police officer, like my dad and my grandfather. My son Jordan had different plans. He had a long record behind him as a student athlete, including captain of the football team. After some college, he was launching in life, fixing up and selling houses, and he was 2 weeks out from starting to train for an electrician's license. On June 22nd, 2020, we got the phone call from his girlfriend. I can't wake him up. We rushed to the house, and his girlfriend told us he took a Percocet. Jordan was transported to the hospital, but they were not able to save him. He was 21 years old. I knew that one Percocet couldn't kill him. What I didn't realize is that people were putting fake pills out there that look just like the real thing, but they're fentanyl. Jordan was health conscious, mindful of his diet and what he put in his body. He would never have taken this pill if he thought it might be poisoned. And I keep thinking that I should have known because I'm a police officer, but my training never told me about this. My family, there's 3 of us now, my husband, my daughter, and me, but Jordan is here encouraging us to still live and have fun. That's hard to do without him physically. What I can do is tell his story. That's why I'm now working to spread awareness among students and why I'm telling you about Jordan, my beautiful child.
My name is Andy Gish. I'm an ER and harm reduction nurse. I remember the time before the overdose epidemic started. and I remember the day it all became too much. I was working in room 1 of my ER when they brought in a young man in his 20s who had overdosed. What I remember the most was that he was wearing brand new red sneakers. We were able to get his heart beating again, and his blood pressure was good. He actually looked okay. But we knew he'd been down for too long and that we weren't going to be able to save him. I remember his mother getting there and the doctor telling her that he was never going to wake up. Then I watched his family file in. How are you supposed to see this and even begin to comprehend that your son, your brother, your loved one is not going to wake up? Around this time, it became all too overwhelming for me because I was losing people I loved too, and neighbors, and so many patients. I wanted to find a solution, so now I'm out there focused on reducing harm and teaching people how to stay safer. Fentanyl being introduced to the drug supply has definitely made this more challenging.
Thank you to all three of you for your powerful stories.
So we want to understand how we got here, and that's why we're now joined by two guests. I want to first say hello to you, Ed Turnan. Ed, you lost your son, Charlie, to fentanyl in 2020. He was only 22 years old, and in his honor, you started a movement to spread awareness called Song for Charlie. Right. You know what we really want to understand is we've been hearing warnings about drugs for 50 years, and there's something different going on now. What is that?
There really is something different. And the way I describe it is that there's been a seismic shift in the drug landscape in America. And it started really in the early mid-20-teens. And a couple of mega trends have occurred since that time. One is the transition from plant-based raw materials for the manufacture of illicit drugs to chemicals like fentanyl. Illegal drug traffickers have figured out that it's way more profitable to stir up some chemicals than it is to grow plants and harvest them and ship them. So chemicals are much more profitable. So they've been using fentanyl and other synthetics like methamphetamine starting around that time. The other major trend is the practice of counterfeiting tablets to look just like prescription pills. Because Gen Z, as they came of age in this time period, is a generation that is used to medications, and many of their schoolmates they grew up with had Adderall or medications for learning differences or pain or wisdom teeth. They were used to it, familiar with sharing them even. And so drug traffickers began producing pills that look just like oxycodone or Percocet or Xanax that these young people are familiar with, and that's what's caused the spike. They're fakes made of fentanyl, that's right.
How are they getting them?
They are getting them either mostly on social media, through drug dealers post up on social media, advertise their wares there, and make these young people aware that these pills are available to them. But also regular, dealers on the street, friends. The market has literally been flooded with these fake pills made of fentanyl, which we've nicknamed fentapills, to the point where what we tell kids is you really cannot get a legitimate Xanax anymore. We tell people, just like there's no real chicken in a nugget, there's no real Xanax on Snapchat. If you need medication, there's no shame in that. Get it from your doctor through a pharmacy. You can't trust any pill you come across on the street or online.
Jim Crotty, you work and teach at American University, but you were a former DEA agent for a dozen years. Track for us how fentanyl got to where it is and where we are now and how this has happened.
Yeah, it's a great question, and Ed's exactly right. What we're seeing today is the single largest transformation in the drug trade ever. And what's really changed over time, the evolution of the opioid crisis that we're experiencing today, it didn't happen overnight. It really started over 30 years ago, where the use of prescription drugs that were aggressively marketed really laid the foundations for what is going on now. So it's often thought about in terms of various waves, right? So we started with the prescription drug crisis, which then shifted into heroin, and then ultimately fentanyl, which is really why we're seeing a lot of the overdose deaths. So, what really changed? Ed already talked about the synthetic drugs. That's a major revolution. And then the other, I think, is the lethality. Drugs have always been around. That's nothing new. What's different today is how lethal they are.
So to that point, we wanted to give people a sense of what a lethal dose of fentanyl looks like. So we're going to do a very, very quick demonstration. This is salt, I just want to be clear, but we want to show you the proportions. And Ed, you're going to just scoop out for us a sample of salt that would equal the amount of fentanyl that would kill a person.
Yeah, and it's kind of tricky because it's such a small amount. We want to try and get it right. This is just for illustration purposes, but that's approximately 2 milligrams of a dry powder, similar to fentanyl. And for someone who doesn't have a tolerance to opioids, so we're talking about these naive users who may get fentanyl inadvertently, it is as little as that amount can be lethal the first time.
Okay, this is insane.
And you can also see how it would get mixed into other drugs, cocaine, very easily disguised. Jim, why are the dealers selling a drug that's killing their customers? What's that logic?
Yeah, well, sadly, these are profit-driven enterprises, right? So, and that's built into the cost of doing business for these dealers. In some cases, the dealers may not know what they're selling. Ultimately, and to Ed's earlier point about these drugs being so profitable, just a little bit goes a long way, and they're in the business of making money. So, unfortunately, there's very little care about what the impacts are.
But why are kids and people just taking drugs that can kill them? It just seems crazy to me.
Well, this is all happening at a time when we have a very well documented youth mental health crisis going on. The urge to self-medicate. There's an old saying that people take drugs for two reasons: to either feel better or to feel good.
I'm going to jump in because we're going to get into that in our next section. And what we're hearing is that the danger still really isn't being recognized, and why that is and how we can change it is what we're going to get to when we come right back. Welcome back. I'll be introducing our new guests on the panel in just a moment, but first, Ed, I wanted to turn to you again. As I mentioned, you created Song for Charlie in honor of your son, and before the break, you were asked the question, why are kids getting and using drugs that can kill them? And I want to pick up on that point because that's where we're going in this segment.
Right. Well, Charlie represents this new category of a victim that has fairly recently emerged of people who are younger, earlier in their journey with substances and perhaps not yet addicted. Charlie was a 22-year-old senior, so he knew what a Percocet was, which is the fake pill that killed him, and he took only one, as directed, the proper dosage. Mm-hmm. But he didn't understand that these fakes were out there and that the pill he got was not Percocet at all, but was filled with fentanyl.
So it's a matter of not knowing.
It's a deception.
I want to also introduce Stephanie Quell. You also have an organization. It's called Do It for Jack, again, named for a child who died. Your child, yes. Jack, was 25 from fentanyl. And again, the same story. He didn't know.
No.
What happened?
He was out with his friends watching college football, and they both died, so honest to God, we don't know exactly what happened, mm-hmm. but they were looking for them, and the next day found them both, and Chris had already passed, and Jack had a heartbeat, and then they transported him to the hospital, and then Tom and I just had no idea, thank God, because we had to drive from Cincinnati to Baltimore, not knowing what was going on, and we just had to piece it together, but I believe there was warnings that weekend, and why he didn't listen to that and see it. I think these kids don't realize that it can happen to anyone. They're not invincible. Yeah. And one wrong decision, and it's costing them their lives.
Yeah, the challenge seems to be creating a message that young people will listen to and mm-hmm. that will stick. And did either of your kids get education in school, in the classroom, about the risk of fentanyl?
I don't think so, yeah.
Fentanyl, right. No.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask Jen Hicks to join
mm-hmm.
the panel. Jen, you are an educator with the Beaverton, Oregon School District. You teach health there. That district lost a number of kids, and you also knew one of the students.
Yeah. In the spring of 2021, we lost at least 4 students that we were made aware of, one of which was my former student. And our district came together and created a campaign to help better raise awareness and educate not only our students, but our parents, our community, and we took a whole school-wide approach for grades 6 through 12 that there were required lessons that were going to be taught at each grade level, which meant that at the high school level in particular, we had to train all of our teachers to teach this, because you can't just rely on a health class, because they don't take health every year. So we put them in our advisory classes, which all kids, kind of like a homeroom, and had those lessons taught there, which required trainings for all of our staff to get as well.
So one thing that keeps coming up in my mind is, kids have been getting drug education for years. What do you say when you're teaching a class that you think is working to get the kids to listen anew, that something different is going on? Well, what is your opening?
My opening, I try and use a lot of what's called trauma-informed practices, where I start with a content warning that what I'm about to share with them is a very serious topic, one that can be challenging to hear, because I'm going to talk about young people who have died and how those lives of those individuals have been completely changed, and that we need to be able to sit in some discomfort and hear these messages, but I need them to hear the relevancy of, you cannot trust a random pill. This is life or death. There's no experimenting with these substances.
Stephanie, you're also doing grassroots work, and you have a focus. You are definitely focusing also on adults.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
In the education, I have to give Beaverton credit. Like, when you go to look for resources to educate, it's very hard to find. So them being on the forefront of that is amazing. So when we were speaking to the students, and then we would go do adult education, whether it be a corporation or a parent group, they had no idea. So then I was like, okay, well, we can talk to the kids all we want, and they may or may not go home and share with their parents what they learned today at school. But if the parents don't know, then they can't have that even playing field conversation.
You mentioned a story about your own dad not knowing.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I just said to my dad, I was asking him questions. What he said was, I was aware of fentanyl, I just didn't know. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, why didn't you talk to Jack then? So I think everybody hears of fentanyl, but they don't have the knowledge of what exactly it does and how little, like Ed showed you, it is trace amounts. And what she said, you can't even try nowadays. And I think that's the message.
And very briefly, we had a conversation a while ago where you said there's another way to kind of persuade kids to take this seriously, and that's like let them know they're being ripped off. Tell me about that.
We were given a couple of pro tips early on when we were talking about educating kids. Number one, don't give them the don't do drugs talk. They all feel like they've heard that before. But tell them that focus on the deception. This is not what you're looking for. You're being tricked. And the other thing is to kind of triangulate. Take advantage of their affinity and their love for their friend group. Think how important that was to you as a 16-year-old. And don't say less to a bulletproof teen, you don't want this to happen to you, but you would hate for this to happen to any of your friends or anyone you love. And that seems to help it go down a little bit.
It's a different kind of connection to the
different
issue.
Angle, yeah.
All right, I want to thank all three of you. We're going to take another break, and when we return, we're going to share one of the most important things to know, which is how to recognize when someone is experiencing a fentanyl overdose. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Every fentanyl overdose represents a true medical emergency.
As we've made clear, it's life or death. But to do anything about it, you first need to understand that it's happening.
We want to talk about that now with Madeline Hilliard, who's an EMT who also founded Team Awareness Combating Overdose, or TACO.
Madeline, talk us through, what does an overdose look like?
Absolutely. So in the event of an overdose, there are 4 steps you're going to have to take to save somebody's life. If you do them all correctly, you'll only have to do 3. Step number 1 is recognizing the signs of an overdose. Step number 2 is calling 911. Step number 3 is giving Narcan. 4 is rescue breaths and CPR if the Narcan doesn't work, but we'll come back to those. The key 3 signs you need to look for in the event of an opioid overdose. Number 1 is unconsciousness. So if the person looks like they're sleeping, how do you know that they're truly unconscious from the overdose? You're going to do a trap pinch. So you're gonna pinch the corner between their neck and their shoulder as hard as you can. If you try this on yourself, you can see it hurts. You're gonna do that as hard as they can. If they don't wake up, they are unconscious. The next thing you're gonna check for is their breathing. Are they breathing or are they breathing too slowly? You can check by placing your hand over their chest and feeling for the rise and fall of their breath. If they're breathing not at all or very slowly, less than once every 5 seconds, that is a medical emergency. That person may also sound like they're snoring. That's not an okay breathing sound. You need to call 911 for a medical emergency. The third and telltale sign of an opioid overdose is pinpoint pupils. You can check for this by pulling out your smartphone, turning on the flashlight, and shining it in the person's eye for about 3 seconds. Then you're gonna move the phone off their eye and you should see their pupil get larger. If their pupil does not get larger, it's pinpoint, tiny. That is a telltale sign of an opioid overdose. You'll definitely be calling 911 and giving Narcan.
Thank you, Madeline. When we come back, we want to demonstrate how to use Naloxone. Welcome back. In this part of the program, how to save a life.
So we have heard mention of Naloxone, which is also, I want to point out, commonly known by the brand name Narcan. So you're going to hear these two words used interchangeably. But let's now hear from some people who can tell us firsthand what Naloxone can actually do. Starting with Noelle Davis. Noelle?
Thank you, John. I used to be a shift supervisor at Starbucks. One afternoon, there was a problem in one of the bathrooms. The door was locked from the inside, but I could see along the bottom of the door that the lights were out. I knocked, but there wasn't a response, so I unlocked the door. From the inside, I could see a young man was unconscious with a needle in his arm. By amazing coincidence, I had just been trained in how to administer Narcan 3 days earlier by a nurse who was handing out Narcan and advocating for the dignity of drug users. They're somebody's son, she wrote, somebody's daughter. And now somebody's son was literally on the floor in front of me. In those days, Narcan came in a syringe with a needle. I called 911 and I tell the dispatcher, I have Narcan. Are you willing to administer it? Yes, I say, but my hands are shaking. She talks me through it. I injected the Narcan in his arm. After a moment, his eyes open and he started to move again. Suddenly, the paramedics are there. They pushed me out of the bathroom and get to work. When they came out, they were patting me on the back, shaking my hand. They said, you know you saved that guy's life. I said, I'm just a barista, which may be true, but I'm really glad I had the Narcan and knew how to use it.
When I woke up, I was in an ambulance. I was awake for maybe 15 seconds. I thought to myself, what happened? Did I break a bone? Did I pass out? And then I passed out again. So I had actually overdosed after taking a common party drug that was laced with fentanyl. I didn't know that it was there. I read stories about fentanyl online, but the danger never felt real to me. I didn't know anyone who'd come in contact with it. But now I had, and it should have killed me. The only reason I'm here is because a few weeks earlier, some of my friends at school had been trained in how to use Narcan by a group that was going around college campuses. It turned out my friends had Narcan, they administered it to me, and they called 911. They quite literally saved my life. And I know I made a bad decision, and that's the last time that I ever tried drugs. I hesitated to share this story because there's still a lot of stigma, and it's easier for me to just move on. But I know that I was given a second chance, and so many others have not been given. And I owe it to share the warning. I mean, fentanyl is more common than we think, and it's deadly. And of course, I want everyone to know about Narcan. I mean, that's why I'm here. If my story can save one person, then it's worth sharing.
After my friend Gavin died of a fentanyl overdose, my friend Zoe and I started asking ourselves, what can be done? We learned about a fast-acting drug called Naloxone or Narcan. At school, it's only available to teachers and staff. Students weren't allowed to carry it, much less use it in emergency. The reality is that when a kid overdoses, they're not necessarily going to be anywhere near a teacher. What we wanted was to carry Narcan legally and to include instruction on how to use it. At first, this idea made the school authorities uneasy, but we convinced our local district to support our cause. And then we set out to change the law across Colorado as a whole. We collaborated with our state representative and testified to the state legislature to create a bill. It's now legal for students in Colorado to carry and administer Narcan, and maybe, if it had happened earlier, maybe Gavin would have been okay, because somebody would have had Narcan in their pocket. But at least, Gavin, now we have that right, and that's a tribute to you.
Again, thank you to our storytellers. These stories tell us there really are things that any of us can do to address the medical emergency that is fentanyl.
To help focus on that, let's welcome back Andy Gish. Andy, you're the woman who trained the barista how to save a life that we heard about earlier today. I mean, extraordinary. So, and you also are the director of the Georgia Overdose Prevention Center.
And Madeline Hilliard, you're an EMT. You founded TACO, as we mentioned before, which focuses on college campuses. But you trained the college students who saved the life of that young man who told the story of waking up in the ambulance. So both of you have saved lives. We want to focus in this question on the question, what can you do? And for item number one, the answer is purchase Naloxone and learn how to use it. In fact, I want to point out that everyone who is attending the studio taping will be receiving a supply of Naloxone as they leave. But Andy, show us how it works.
Yeah, so if you were to come across someone who, again, is unresponsive and not breathing normally, what you're going to do is you're going to actually tilt their head back, and then administer Naloxone. You're going to open this up. It's a one-time use dose. So you open it up, it's ready to go. There's no cap, there's no twisting. You literally stick it up the nostril and you squirt, okay? And you can redose this every 2 to 4 minutes. And in the meantime, you're going to be, of course, calling 911. And you're going to be giving rescue breaths about every 5 seconds.
And it's not something that can hurt you. In other words, there's no.
So what response, Madeline, are you looking for when you've just given them Narcan? What do you know to do next?
So Narcan, nasal naloxone, opioid overdose reversal medications like these, they're really awesome because what you'll see happen is even if somebody is not breathing and they're blue lips, blue in the face, you give that one push of the naloxone and a few seconds will go by. It might take up to 2 minutes, but oftentimes it's in the first 30 seconds, you'll see them go and start breathing again and actually watch their life get saved.
Okay, on the list of what can you do, item number 2 is challenge stigma to have important conversations. Andy, that's a very important topic for you.
Absolutely. There is so much stigma around this, and with that comes shame. And when people are feeling shame, they're not going to share their risks. They're not going to talk to their people about their safety net, about how to keep them safe. So the more we do to reduce stigma and openly talk about this, which we're doing today, the more people will feel comfortable sharing their risks so that they can be more protected.
Madeline, tell us what you came up against with college administrators when you tried to train people and students and teach them about Narcan.
Absolutely. You know, we're talking about life or death scenarios. So large institutions, they're concerned about liability, who's at fault, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the important thing to remember is that without this medication, that person is going to die. There is no other alternative without the medication. So by providing naloxone, the other important thing to remember, you don't use naloxone on yourself. You're giving somebody naloxone or having naloxone yourself to help another life. It also serves to warn people about the dangers of fentanyl. And hey, you might need this medication to save someone's life. That's how dangerous this can be. So I think naloxone helps to reduce stigma. It also ultimately reduces liability.
Item number 3 on the list of what can you do is learn about overdose prevention plans, hotlines, and local mental health services. Madeline, your effort has been going for some time. I'm just wondering, what data do you have that it's actually working, that lives are being saved?
Absolutely. So our organization, TACO, Team Awareness Combating Overdose, we have received over 1,500 reports from our student users that they either accessed fentanyl test strips or naloxone and used it to save a life, or it saved their own life. So those are direct reports from users. There may be other cases we don't know about, but we do get to hear stories like the student we had earlier.
And same for you, Andy. I get the sense that you are making progress.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been distributing naloxone for about 10 years, and we've had 11,800 reversals reported back to us.
Wow, that's amazing.
And for the audience at home, it's important to notice that in the last couple of years, this is becoming more normal for everyday people to do. Now it's over 40% of overdoses that 911 shows up on the scene. A bystander has already given naloxone 40% of the time, and we're saving 250,000 lives a year using naloxone. That's the number of people who overdose and survive. The power to do that is now in your hands.
Thank you both. When we come back, a police chief who doesn't want you to be afraid to call 911.
Welcome back. We're joined again by Stephanie Quell, who we met earlier, who lost her son Jack to fentanyl poisoning. And I also want to welcome Tom Siren, who's the police chief of the town of Newtown, Ohio, outside Cincinnati. Stephanie, we were having a conversation a few minutes ago about the stigma around drug use and the harm that that does, which is silence around the topic. You are out here as a parent talking about it, but you've talked to us about how a lot of people just don't want to touch the topic.
That's right. It's been a tough road trying to say it's better to speak up and talk about it versus staying silent. We've had school systems who won't let us in, or they've had kids go down but they're not doing anything about it or sending emails out to the community. We've had corporations say no because then they might be associated with drug use. I think that's the thing too. The boy that died with Jack, his dad told a whole different story to what happened to his son. And, you know, I was a school teacher. It was a tough thing to come out to my community and say, you know, this happened to my family. But I also felt like staying silent would not save somebody else. And that's kind of what our foundation is doing, is trying to save the next Jack, per se.
Which means talking about it.
You have to talk about
it.
But
you think individuals and organizations and families are just afraid to be associated with it because of the stigma?
I believe so. I think once you feel like they might think that now they're associated as being a drug user, but there's so many kids out there now recreationally using that they shouldn't.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what us parents didn't realize, is that they're out there doing this, and we have to have those conversations.
So, Chief, it's a pleasure to have you here. The only person currently working in law enforcement as part of the program, so we're glad to have you. And you became first aware of the fentanyl crisis hitting your community several years ago. How did it hit?
Well, I'm the police chief of a very small town just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, and I had an entire family, a mother and all three of her sons, literally an entire generation, lost one by one to substance use disorder. And it really changed my perspective from a law enforcement, and should I be the primary responder to what really is a chronic mental medical health condition. So it really allowed me to shift from the primary responder to a link, and then start advocating for changes in law enforcement and the community as a whole.
Doesn't the law, though, require you to catch and punish the users as well as the dealers, and what do you feel about that?
Yeah, so we're still at a crossroads. Locally, we've made a lot of changes in the Cincinnati-Hamilton County area, but across the country, there's still some in law enforcement who believe it is punishment. You did something illegal, we have to punish you. I think what we're showing in our community is we've had 3 years in a row of a reduction of overdose deaths, cut our reported overdoses in half. And I think we can say, look, that longer term care being that link instead of primary responder to either harm reduction immediate, outreach their intermediate, and then long-term recovery really makes a difference.
So we've heard two advocates on the program come on and say, you've got to call 911. Mm-hmm. In your community, if you're with somebody and you're doing drugs together and one person dies and you call 911, do you get in trouble?
Well, we have a Good Samaritan law, so you do not get in trouble for minor drug possessions, for drug paraphernalia. So what's going to happen in our area, especially in Cincinnati-Hamilton County, is we're not here. Look, I'm law enforcement. I should be saving lives. That's the primary. So we're going to go and make sure we can save someone's life. connect them to the fire medical and get them treated to the hospital. That other person that called, you just saved someone's life, so you were part of this life-saving effort. You're not going to get in trouble on that end either.
So the term Good Samaritan law, we just want to make clear, means what?
So the Good Samaritan law allows for someone who overdoses, allows for that other person to call. Check your state. Each state's going to have different laws and how they apply.
And I just want to point out that right now most states do have some version of a Good Samaritan law. Some are more or less forgiving for somebody who would be in that situation. And some states actually require you to call, that it would be a misdemeanor not to call. So it's a mixed picture, but fundamentally going in the right direction.
I think we're getting there, and this is where the national conversation comes in. It'd be so nice to have a national law that covers everything. I get from state to state, but it'd be great to have this national law. I think especially when it comes to law enforcement, we are first responders, that's what we're called. We should be making sure we save people's lives. So hopefully elected officials, those in legislature, hear that and say we need to make changes from not only state but national
and
level.
is it a known thing in your community, Newtown, that you can call 911?
Cincinnati, Hamilton County, it is. You call us, we're either going to give you harm reduction materials, we're going to link you to services. If you want recovery, we'll walk you through that process. It's not the same everywhere. I wish it was. But hopefully we're going to be a model and people see the difference we're making, and that long-term treating it as a chronic mental medical health condition instead of punishment makes a big difference.
Okay, so are both of you agreeable to take some questions from our audience?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do that. Let's take some questions now from our audience. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Braden Snow, and my question to you guys is you're talking a lot about getting the message across to the younger audience, but we know that can be difficult because, they don't want to listen, or they think they're invincible, or it's not going to happen to them. But someone I knew and loved, it happened to them and they didn't get the message. So I'm just wondering, how do we get that message through to the younger generation?
I can take that. So I primarily have been speaking to your age group. And right away when you said that, first thing I think too is anything that you've learned or had people, your social media is your guys' world. So pushing out stories or facts or anything you find out via any of us running is great. I also find that you listen to people your own age. So finding the stories, or if we're presenting, I know Song for Charlie has started a peer-to-peer program, so having peers talk to peers. So when I go to a speaking engagement and I bring one of Jack's friends, he brings down the house, he or she. It's very powerful coming from your generation. And I think one of the number one questions that was asked to me is like, what do I do if I'm in a situation where I'm uncomfortable? And so the best answer I came up with is to use Jack's name, use Charlie's name, use anybody's name and say, you know what, my friend Jack died, so I'm not gonna do that. Having that ready in your arsenal, so when you go to college and someone's offering you something or whatever, you have that out. And I think they would back off knowing that your friend died using it. But I think for sure the power of social media and helping us then continue our message. You guys are part of our conversation now. This is now your story to take from here today and pass it along to your friends. We would really appreciate that. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is Emmy. My question is about stopping the supply and stopping the dealers. Doesn't that matter too?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I'll take that one. Since I'm the cop, it's probably best I try to take that one.
Okay.
So really, it's both. It can't be one or the other. It can't just be supply. It's got to be both supply and demand. And I don't think it's a matter of necessarily eradicating. It's not a one-pronged approach. It's multi-pronged. You can't eradicate, but can we mitigate the damage, especially what fentanyl is causing? And if we can mitigate that damage, and it has to be both, can we mitigate on the supply side and the demand side, then I think if we end up doing what we want to do, and that's save more lives and also bring more awareness. So yes, there has to be that supply side in order to hopefully reduce some of that, but we cannot forget about the demand side. We've done that in the past when it became prescription pills, and we were not prepared for the influx of other narcotics coming from, especially outside the country, fentanyl, and then we saw the impact of that. So we got to do both supply and demand.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, everybody, for your questions, and thank you for your answers. When we come back, we're going to hear one last personal story. Please stay with us. We are back with Ed Turner. And Ed, first of all, we want to thank you and Song for Charlie because you gave us so much education on the topic as we were preparing for this program. And I want to recommend 2 films Song for Charlie has made, The New Drug Talk and Real Talk About Fake Pills. But I also have a question for you in all of this as we come to the end of the program. Where's the hope in this whole story?
Well, just the program and the stories we've heard today give me hope and inspiration, because what we need in this country is a grassroots movement of individual citizens who are empowered with deep enough knowledge to take action to save lives. And that's what we saw in this program today, and we see it happening around the country with the guests you've had and the stories we've heard.
Thanks.
So I leave here very hopeful.
Thank you very much. And we have heard a number of personal stories throughout the program. And now here is one last one from my co-host, Caren Zucker. Caren?
Thank you, John. I'd like to talk about my son. His name is Jonah. He was poisoned by fentanyl. He was 25 years old when he died. And I'll never see him again, or hear his voice again, or hear that laugh again, or get to hug him. And I can't tell you how much I wish I had warned him so that he might still be with us and my family today. But I didn't know most of the things that we've talked about here before Jonah died. I don't think he did either. And I like to imagine his friends would have called 911 in time if they knew earlier. That's why I wanted to make this program, for all the Jonahs out there who are still alive and well, and for those who love them. I hope you now understand the danger better, and that you're hearing the alarm bells that I missed. Please pay attention to them, be smart, and save a life.
Thank you, Caren. And for Charlie and Jonah, thank you for doing this program, all of you who took part. I didn't know Charlie, but I knew Jonah. So thanks everybody for joining us at home, and for more information, I want to let you know you can click the QR code on your screen. That is a wrap on this national important conversation, a fentanyl alarm. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you all so much for being here. This program is going to help save thousands of lives, and everyone here today is a hero for being part of it.